welcome to Innovate Africa. And if you're tuning in for the first time, what we do is we interview founders of businesses, innovative businesses that impact lives on the African continent. Now, today's discussion centers around doing business in emerging markets, especially scaling into emerging markets. So let's say you're sitting in Tanzania and you want to scale to South Africa. What do you need? Well, you need people with local understanding. They understand how people operate business-wise. They understand culture. Those are important. But you also need to overlay that with very rich data. But where do you find it? It's easier said than done. Enter Edoc online. So we're going to be chatting to Tunde Ogundipe. Thank you very much, the founder and CEO of Edoc. At first glance, Edoc would seem like electronic document, but it's more than that. What exactly does Edoc do?
So what Edoc does is that we basically leverage technology and data to provide financial services to the underserved and underbanked. Edoc actually started, so as much as you think Edoc, it means electronic document. So we actually, my co-founder and I used to work on an open banking project, and we actually started thinking about how could we use open banking to solve problems in the African space. And one of the ways we thought about it was we could basically use Edoc, take financial data digitally to provide financial services, but it evolved. So it started off as an electronic document submission solution, but it's evolved over time to where now we do a lot of things. So we leverage technology and data to provide access to credit data for credit assessment. We're able to enact direct debit mandates on people's accounts through our direct connections with banks. So what we basically do is we do integrations directly with banks, and we're able to pull financial data in real time directly from the banks and provide it to a third party, whether it's a bank, a lender, or a visa embassy.
Moving on to why you exist as a business. Why do you get up in the morning? What is your core purpose?
So the problem we're trying to solve is the lack of simplified financial data in the African space. If I give an example, I mentioned to you that I live in the UK. If I go to a Starbucks in the UK, and when I get my bank statement, you will see Starbucks. But if I were to do that in the Nigerian market, it will show a POS transaction. That means when I take my bank statement to give to a lender, they're unable to understand it. First of all, I have to physically take a bank statement and I have to go to the bank, get a stamped bank statement, and take it to the lender. Now the lender is going to spend another 30, 40 minutes trying to understand my bank statement, trying to understand my income. And that becomes a problem, especially for SMEs, women, grassroots communities that have inconsistent income patterns. So that's what we're trying to solve.
Now, Edoc is a business that's captured a lot of people's attention, but this was not always the case. You had to start a business. So I'm always interested in the founding story. What can you share along those lines?
So we started off, my co-founder and I used to work on an HSBC open banking project, and we used to have lunch together. And, one of the things we thought about was this can actually, I'll tell you the issue. The issue is like we have family members always asking us that want to come to the UK, and they were always asking us, can you give me a bank statement to support my visa application? Now, this is very intrusive because a bank statement is very personal. And when we started working on this open banking project, we thought about, wow, there's a way that I could actually take my bank statement digitally and submit it to the embassy so that when my family members, my mother wants to apply for a visa, I don't have to physically give her that bank statement. It's not sitting around, it's not intrusive. So we basically take it and submit to the visa embassy. So that's how we started, and we started brainstorming. But the more we brainstorm, we realized we're sitting on a gold mine and we could actually do a lot. And that's how it's evolved over time.
These things always sound easy in retrospect, but we all know there are rocks and boulders in our way. What were some of the challenges that you had to overcome?
It's been very difficult. I'm going to be, startup life is very, very difficult. So whilst we had a good idea, which is what is always good. Implementation is always key. One of the stumbling block is regulation. Getting access to people's financial data, so you have to work with the banks, their local data privacy issues. But I think the most stumbling block is trying to convince the banks to partner with you, especially in Nigeria, where you have open banking is just a word. You have open banking regulation, but it does not mean anything, which meant that we had to go to each bank and create a direct connection to each bank. And now the challenge is how you convince each bank to give you their customers' personal details. Now, luckily for us, my co-founder and I had worked for every single UK bank across products that impacted every single UK household. So we understood the banking infrastructure. So one of the things was we were able to go to the bank and say, look, we have done this in the UK. We have an open banking license in the UK. So not only were we building our infrastructure, we're helping the banks build their infrastructure. So we started off with 2 banks, and in the space of a year, we had 13 banks on our platform. And that's because we understand the value proposition, and we also had the technology know-how on how to implement this.
When people talk about collecting data, sharing data, giving people insights, very few understand how data can actually impact lives on the African continent. So let's talk about that. How do you assist other businesses out there in a manner that they've never been able to be serviced before?
So one of the things that we're doing now, if I give an example, is giving access to SMEs, women, grassroots, access to finance. And when I say access to finance, I'll give you a practical example. So one of the things about SMEs, which contribute about 84% of most of the country's GDP, is that there's limited access to finance because the banks don't understand their inconsistent income patterns. So we're speaking to a bank, and one of the things the bank told us was, oh, the way we do is that we take out the top 20% and we take out the bottom 20% and we lend on the median. Now, everyone knows that most companies end their top 80% comes from the top 20. So if you want to give me a loan, cutting out my top 20%, you've basically taken out my huge earners, which means the loan does not work. But because we have, not only do we have pool data, we run it through a proprietary model that simplifies this data, shows you their income, their risk, their spending patterns, so the banks can basically make more informed decisions. So we're now giving access to a group, SMEs, women, grassroots, that are traditionally excluded by traditional banks or traditional credit providers.
Let's focus a little bit on the market you currently operate in and then what your roadmap to scale actually looks like.
So we operate in the Nigerian market currently. We've just applied for a license in Ghana and Kenya. So our goal is to be operational in Nigeria, Ghana, and Kenya in Q1. So we are Pan-African focused, which means that we want to provide market access to anyone that comes into the African space. So our goal is to be in Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Egypt, and South Africa by Q2, which gives us 60% of the market volume, which means we're not only able to do credit assessment or payments, we can now start looking at trade routes and looking at trade finance. So we're looking to take trade finance products that take about a month to 6 weeks, and we're looking to shorten that timeline to 5 minutes.
You talk about open banking, but I see very little being done in the way of open banking in South Africa, for example. As a matter of fact, I've got the question as to whether or not open banking actually exists on the African continent. So maybe you want to answer that and then also talk about the value offering that you want to offer businesses in South Africa.
So it's not just South Africa that doesn't have open banking. I think everyone in Africa does not have open banking. While they talk about open banking means one single layer. It does not mean that I have to go to 13 different banks that have 13 different formats, that have 13 different data formats. It means everybody gives me one single API that is the same format. So no one has that. But I think South Africa is a very important market because there are people that are underserved. When we start talking about South Africa, we need to look at the townships. How can we give access to people in the township based on tailored finance? One of the examples I would give would be insurance. Everyone gives a one size fits all for insurance, but the affordability, you and I could earn 5,000 Rand every month, but you might have expenses of 4,500 and your disposable income is 500, and my disposable income could be 200. So you should be giving me insurance that I can afford. And so that we need to get to tailored finance. What can I afford? How much electricity can I afford? Rather than people, so when you look at underserved or the lower tier market, a lot of people are on prepaid utilities, which means they pay more. But with tailored financing, it means you can give them a postpaid that is structured to their financing and what they can afford.
A lot of investors with their heads screwed on properly will see Africa as the final frontier when it comes to opportunity. There are lots of fintechs in the space. So, competition is definitely rife on the continent. Well, it's increasing at least. Now, with your infrastructure play, what differentiates you in the greater scheme of things? If an investor had to ask you that question, what would you say to them?
Very simple. We want to be the plate of Africa. Any financial institution, whether it's the HSBC, the Deutsche Bank of this world, they want to come into the African space. The African space is deemed as a high-risk market, which means you cannot get away with regular KYC. You have to do an enhanced due diligence, which is proof of funds, which means you need to understand whoever you're doing business with, where their funds are coming from. We are going to be that sole provider. We are going to be the sole provider of financial data for all of Africa. We're already doing this in Nigeria. We're going to do this in Ghana and Kenya in the next coming months. And by next year, we will have 5 countries giving you 60%, which means we can give you one API that gives you access to 60% of the volumes continent. So why we're going to be the plate of Africa, and everyone's going to have to speak to us if you want that data. And we can do this faster, nimble. We understand this market. We understand infrastructure. So it takes 3 things to survive in this market. You have to have the relationships, you have to have the technology know-how, and you have to understand the culture. We have all 3 of them. We already have the banking knowledge. We already have the relationships. Now all we're doing is understanding the local culture and making sure that our products align to the local regulations and local culture. Because working in Nigeria is different from Ghana. Working in Ghana is different from South Africa. People think differently. People buy differently. And that's what we have.
I think the follow-on question to this is, what does your road to profitability look like?
We're not profitable yet, and that's because we're an infrastructure play. We are building an infrastructure. We're not going to be profitable overnight, but we do have a roadmap that gets us to profitability, and that's through distribution. And that's why we are focused on enterprise sales, which is where our profitability comes in, because we already have enterprise customers. We just signed an agreement with a major bank in Nigeria right now that gives us access to 400 fintechs that can use our product. We're already close to an agreement with an international bank that needs data for all of the African space. So we do have a roadmap to profitability.
And who are you looking to partner with?
We're looking to partner with Visa. We want to be on the Visa payment gateway, which means that any merchant on the Visa gateway can access our product, whether it's for credit analytics or to enact a direct debit mandate on accounts. And we're all about strategic partnerships. We just partnered with an address verification company that allows, while we do financial verification, that means they can do address verification, and we give a user one API to do both.
I alluded to the fact that some investors have their heads screwed on properly when it comes to Africa. A lot of others are still too scared to touch the continent. They think it's too risky. What do you say to them?
My response is, I've lived in the UK. I've worked for every single bank in the UK. And I am in Africa, and I understand the African space. The African space, this is the time to come into the African space. We talk about the African space, about everyone keeps saying it's the next frontier, it's the next frontier. It's no longer the next frontier, it's now. Africa has population under 30. It is the first truly digital market, which means everyone has grown up on smartphones. They don't know anything else. So everything for the next future of Africa is going to be done digitally. That's what we're building, that data infrastructure. When people say data is the new oil, it's what it is. We have access to data, which means we can do data as a service. We could use data for market intelligence. If I give an example for market intelligence, let's say, for instance, McDonald's wants to come into Ghana. Conventional wisdom says go into Accra. But because we have data, we have data that we run metrics, we can tell you how much people are spending on burgers in Accra. We can tell you how much people are spending in restaurants. So it's that information. We think Africa's time is now, and Visa is doing the right thing. Visa has committed to investing 1 billion in Africa, and I think other companies, other investors need to start looking at why is Visa focused on Africa.
Talent is something we have to talk about. Obviously, for Edoc to be sustainable, you need a decent talent pipeline. What are you doing to help facilitate that pipeline?
So, talent is a huge issue in Africa, but one of the things we do is to build companies like Edoc so people can stay. We groom people, we help people understand. We don't just come into the market and just get experienced people. We want to know that we look, our culture is very important to us. We look at people that have talent and then we groom them. And they understand that, and that's why people will stay with us, because not only are we growing, building a company, but they understand the vision, the mission, and what we're doing. And that's how we are going to get people, because right now our company is attractive. You're going to be basically doing the same thing you're doing at Edoc at Barclays. It's just that Barclays has a name brand, but you will do more work. You will understand the market. By the time you are done at Edoc, you will have more experience than what you would have at Barclays. When I worked at HSBC, I was working with developers that were earning 750 pounds a day. We don't have that, so now we have to build that. Now we have to build our talent. And our talent now is comparable to those talent that they have. When we started our integration with banks, the first bank took us 12 months. Now we're doing it in 2 weeks.
Finally, your advice to founders starting out. Just taking it from the perspective of the scars that you've obviously developed, the things that you've learned on your journey. What would you say to those founders?
Don't do it. I'm joking. Look, my advice is, and I've seen this a lot, I see a lot of people jump into businesses or wanting to be a startup founder. It is very difficult. It is very painful. Please get some experience, even if it's a couple of years. Get some experience. It is a very long journey. Don't do it for the money. Please don't misunderstand me. I want the money, but don't do it for the money. Make sure your heart is in it. Make sure you understand what Don't use. I think one of the biggest issues I would say is people try to build a technology to solve a problem. And I tell people, no, first of all, you build a business, then you automate your technology to solve a problem. You don't go build technology to solve a problem. You have to first of all identify the problem, solve that problem, then you use technology around it to automate it. Your technology is supposed to enhance your business process, not people first of all build technology, not even understand the business process. You have to map out the business process, then you use technology to automate it. So you have to be, what's your clear offering? What problem are you trying to solve? Understand that this is a very long journey. Your heart is going to be in it. You're not going to make a lot of money initially. Not everyone's going to be a unicorn, but understand that you have to, and you want, for me, I want to impact lives, but I'm not saying that has to be for everyone. But it's a very long journey, and it's not as easy as people think. And I have to just be honest.
Tunde, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate you making that time available for us on Innovate Africa. And there you go. We don't have a shortage of content on the show. There are lots of businesses on the continent doing amazing stuff to impact lives. Businesses that already have had traction are gaining traction. And we'll keep introducing you to them. If you want to reach out to me at the end of this, my email will be popping up. Feel free to send me a message. And who knows, I could be interviewing you next. Thank you very much for joining us on Innovate Africa.